Well, good Sunday morning, everybody, and thank you for watching Beyond the Headlines. Well, they can't pretend you don't exist. That's how one city consultant described the value of the city's legislative trip to Washington, D.C. And for the first time ever, joined by Webb County and the Laredo Chamber of Commerce. Now, on day one, the delegation focused on trade, tariffs, and border security. They met with groups including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Department of Transportation, and the Embassy of Mexico. Also on day one, major news out of the nation's capital. The U.S. Department of State informed city officials that the presidential permit application for the Columbia Bridge expansion was deemed complete. In a press release, the city reports that the World Trade Bridge expansion is expected to be completed in 2028, while the Columbia Bridge expansion is anticipated to be finalized about 18 months after that. Meanwhile, on day number two, the attention shifted to infrastructure, cybersecurity, and border operations, among other topics. Those topics discussed with the Department of Energy and the Department of State, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, as well as meetings with both Texas senators. To wrap up on the last day, the city says they had a busy day, taking a dozen meetings focused on different funding opportunities and potential trade partnerships. But it wasn't all work and no play. When D.C. couldn't make it to Laredo, Laredo made its way to D.C.
And I'll tell you, I was also very proud to host Laredo Day here in the United States Senate, and we had hundreds of people from Laredo come in. We had members of the congressional delegation throughout South Texas. We had other members of Congress come. We had food from South Texas, Mexican food flown in that was fantastic. We had mariachis. We had a jalapeno eating contest. It was a fantastic celebration of South Texas and a great discussion with the entire delegation from Laredo.
Well, that's where we begin this week's discussion. With us today is Luis Villarreal, of course, General Manager of KGNS. Also joining the conversation are Andrew Carranco from the Laredo Chamber of Commerce. We also have J.D. Gonzalez. He is the President of the National Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association of America. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for being on the panel this morning. Appreciate having you.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So where do we want to get started? I know, J.D., we are so delighted to have you with us. You are an expert and when it comes to the tariffs and what's going on with that and how it's going to affect our local economy. Andrew, you are a jack of all trades. You can talk about everything else, and you were on the trip. Both of you guys,
too.
Both of you guys were actually on the legislative trip with the city. Excellent. So let's talk a little bit first about the trip. This is a annual tradition. Folks go up there. They also do a Texas legislative trip as well, which also happened just a few months prior to this. So what's the value of this trip?
Well, the value is exactly what the consultant said. They can't say no if they don't see you. So being up there and being in someone's face, it really requires their attention. And the fact that we can couple all this with the Laredo Day at the end, where essentially we have a pachanga for these legislators, they remember Laredo very well.
Mm-hmm. And is that important when they're handing out big bucks? You want them to remember you?
Yes, I mean, the Laredo Chamber of Commerce, along with the Laredo Economic Development Corporation and the City of Laredo, when we go up to Washington, D.C. this year with the county, we literally bring back millions of dollars for the community just by showing up and saying, we're here, we're important, and you need to pay attention to us.
Mm-hmm. I don't think, and if I may just jump in here, I think you just made a small comment about the county being part of this trip for the first time, because they normally hadn't been attending in previous years, and how important that is to show us all as one community when we're up there and trying to explain, to paint the picture. You still remember the days, I remember days when you would go to Washington and people say, Laredo where? And why is Laredo important? And it's like, whatever you're eating, driving, or touching probably came through Laredo, and that's kind of why it's important. But I think that it helps a lot when the private sector, the public sector, and the government entities get together and present. So I think that was a good move this year.
Well, when you look at the Valley, for example, they have the Rio Grande partnership, and they go up there in force with all their counties, with all their cities, and they make a big impression. Mm-hmm. When we go up to Washington, we're pretty good about keeping a unified message. Yes, the chamber and the private sector may have some different opinions for the city, and the city may have different opinions with us, and the county may not have the same opinion as the city. But when it comes right down to it, when we go into those meetings, we have an understanding. It is all for Laredo, and it's all for the county. It's what's the most important thing here.
Well, speaking of Laredo and County and JD, tariffs. It seems to be on everybody's mind. I had a very passionate conversation last night with a friend of mine in the industry who tells me that they're dead, that it's doomsday, that it's all over, that Laredo's gone, that, talk to me about tariffs and their impact in Laredo, JD.
Tariffs are challenging right now. The brokerage community is going through a lot. I know one of the things that they're going through is with the administrative changes. They're going out with a tweet, executive order, then they're going out with the policy changes, and then later on the implementation all in one day. The challenges are with automation. So, we're trying to work within the brokerage community, trying to keep up to make sure we follow through. But in the end, it's going to affect the consumer.
So how does it affect, I mean, I know they've been, well, they're going to go up, they're going to go down, these items yes, these items no. I mean, there's a lot of fluidity to it. How is the industry adjusting to that on a daily basis? And is it affecting daily operations right now for the last 2 months? I mean, do we see a decrease in traffic? Do we see, are there goods that are stuck waiting to see what's what?
Now, you know what, right now the challenges are a lot of people are trying to get through before the tariffs become implemented. So everybody's going to large volumes prior to.
Okay.
But there's certain commodities that were affected just on March 12th, which is still in aluminum. And a lot of products are still in aluminum, but then the other commodities that they're trying to push through because they know it's duty free. I know from March 2nd through the 7th or 6th, there was a 3-day time frame in there that there was duties involved. A lot of people were paying that, and they didn't go retroactive when they suspended the tariff. So during that time, a lot of the brokerage community is trying to collect money from the importers, which is usually U.S. individuals, and the small and mid-sized are taking a hit. So they saw that, they felt that for 3 days, so they're waiting to see what happens April 2nd. So I'm looking at maybe the small and mid-size, and this is my personal opinion, slowing down. But I know on top of that, the big manufacturers, they're looking at cutting back and trying to work in that method as well. So there's a lot of challenges going on in our industry. I know that we're trying to keep up and trying to make sure that we follow through with compliance, because that's another challenge that they're trying to come out with. And there's a lot of information that we're trying to sit there and make sure that we keep up with its current administration.
What type of meetings did you guys have related to
Trade and
tariffs and
tariffs.
commerce?
Well, part of that is meeting with the embassies. I think that meeting with embassies is really important. That's something that the private sector actually brought in. We met with the Embassy of Mexico, we met with the Embassy of Canada. And we said, hey, look, on the border, we love trade. This is our lifeblood, and we want to work with you guys, and we want to show you that we want to work with you guys. And they really respect that, because by showing face and saying, hey, there are certain things that are happening and we don't have any control over that, but here on the border we support you guys and we want to work with you guys because you are our lifeblood. They really appreciate that, and they show up to Laredo Day and they have a good time just like everyone else. But it's one of those things where we go up there and we say just that, and we got some meetings with some people in customs, and we described to them exactly what we had our issues with, and JD was a leader on that.
So how does these expansion and new permits and all that stuff, I mean, so it's time, we're driving the car, we're trying to fix it, we got all this, so it's all moving anyway, right? It's all kind of continuing?
Well, I mean, it can't stop.
Right.
Trade's going to happen. The issue with trying to bring, manufacturing Mexico or Canada to the United States is that it's a 7-year commitment at least for a lot of these big corporations.
Well,
so it's not going to happen overnight. So, let's say you want to put that duty on something in Mexico. Well, yeah, that's fine. And the company will say, well, we'll look at building an American plant. But
well, you can't start building tomorrow.
But you can't start building tomorrow.
But
Right.
and that's great that you bring that up, Andrew, because I guess, and listen, we all advocate for our industries. We all are always looking out for what feeds us, right? And, we're going in as Laredo, as a community. We're talking about tariffs as part of the custom brokers and freight forwarders and all that stuff. But when you step back a little bit and you look at the bigger picture, and you start to realize that at some point something needs to change, because we are, as a country, becoming a just consumer We don't build anything. We are not producing anything as a country anymore.
Right, but you see, you're looking at it, frankly, in kind of an older way. We do export. We're one of the largest exporters of a single thing, and we don't even talk about it.
Which is?
Which is?
Services. We're the biggest exporter of services in the world. People come to us for financial advice, for technical advice, and everything
All of
else.
that requires products to be, if the products are not exchanged in commerce, none of that is necessary. I don't need, if I don't have a job producing something, how am I going to buy a product from you? And why would I need your financial advice?
You know, I have to disagree because the thing about it, there's a lot more exports that are being done with automotive. Automotive is a huge commodity that's being exported, and they're being processed in Mexico and bringing back in the United States.
They're sent out, they're assembled and come back.
They come back, and then they do some finishing up here in the States as well. So it's a combination of both Mexico
But they're
and the United
sent
States.
out because it's cheaper to assemble.
It's labor cost,
It's
obviously,
labor
yes.
cost, okay? And so that labor, so the gap between the haves and the have-nots keeps widening because that labor force has been leaving us for decades because it's cheaper to work, to do these things in other places. All I'm saying is that at some point, hard decisions need to be made if there's got to be a little bit more of a future minding vision of what we're going to. We can't just keep talking about the today and how we keep active today without considering, hey, if we keep going down this road, at some point, we're not going to have enough products to do anything.
But the consumer drives this as well. Remember, they want to look for anything that's more economical to buy. So with that being said, the consumer is a driving factor in this. So with that, taking that in consideration, if they start developing here in the United States, they got to take in consideration you're looking at higher prices. So that's one of the give and takes we got to give, or we're working with. But at the same time, we're trying to work with this administration to, as Andrew said earlier, we've had 33 years of free trade agreement. And now they want to move it in within hours.
And you can't just fix it tomorrow?
I mean, I'll say one thing. One thing that has happened in the last 33 years is we have taken, we offshored for years. We went to China, we went to Vietnam, we went to Taiwan, and we did all our manufacturing over there. And in the last 33 years, Mexico's seen the great boom in that sort of manufacturing. The Americans haven't seen that. But then again, we have purposely made sure that we want to export. Now, we want to import these sort of products. Now, there could be a concern in national security. You could say, well, we want to produce so much steel, we want to produce this, we want to produce that. Fine, that's one thing, and that's probably, and frankly, it's necessary. But when it comes down to it, the question's efficiency. Americans are usually the most educated people in the world. We tend to be pretty laborious when it comes to work. I mean, go to Europe and you realize, wow,
I think
Americans
there are a lot
work
of people
really
that would
hard.
disagree with that statement.
Okay, yes.
And take an afternoon siesta.
I might do that this afternoon. But the point is that we work harder than most people in most groups in the world. We really do. I mean, most people take a lot of vacation. Most people take days off. We go out there and we feel guilty when we take a day off. Americans value that efficiency. And when it comes down to it, we don't build trinkets anymore. We're not good at it anymore. What we are very good at is we're building very complex automotive things. We're building complex machinery. We do that well. And we do the services bit.
Okay. Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break, but this is a very enlightening conversation. When we come back, our guests stick with us. We're not letting them go anywhere. We're going to continue where we left off, talking about all things trade, tariffs, and of course, the city's legislative trip. Stay with us for that. Thank you so much for staying with us. We are continuing the conversation where we left off. If you are just joining us right now, though, I want to let you introduce you guys to our two panelists. We've got Andrew Carranco. He's representing the Laredo Chamber of Commerce, went on the recent D.C. trip with the group. And of course, J.D. Gonzalez, you are the president of it's a long organization, but basically custom brokers, national custom brokers, and forwarders. Yes. Thank you. And you were also on the trip as well to Washington, D.C. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sticking around. So before we left on a break, we were talking about, of course, into the tariffs and and how it affects us here locally. Want to talk a little bit about our neighbors to the north, neighbors to the south, how they responded to the tariffs, and the difference in how they responded as well, and what kind of implications that means for us as well.
Well, you know what? I know there was the two methods of negotiation. Mexico, they delayed their tactic where they went out there and they stated, hey, we're going to sit there, follow through, and do a 7-day time frame and then start negotiation. But in the same time frame, they started sending some of the military to do inspections. They started helping out with the immigration crisis, and the fentanyl has reduced. So with those three factors, that's what President Trump is looking at. He's making sure that Mexico's helping out. So when they went out and negotiated, they said they're doing a good job, but there's still things they can improve on as well. On the Canadian border, they're hitting up with retaliatory taxes immediately. On top of that, they're feeling the pain. We were up there visiting the Canadian embassy. One of the biggest discussions because of steel and aluminum were being implemented that day. Some of the definitions, some of the process, and some of the management that we're working through. And considering Canada comes out with 70% of the aluminum, it's one of the biggest topics that we're dealing with up there as well. So.
And you guys are trying to catch up with what's coming out and what's being rescinded all the time right now.
You know what? On tariffs, it's just like I mentioned earlier. Everything's happening in a 1-day time frame. You know, you're going out with a tweet. You're going out with afterwards. You're going out with an executive order. Then after the executive order, we're going out with policy, and then it's implementation. Usually in the same day. The government usually wasn't used to working that fast. So now the trade is trying to keep up, especially with automation. So that's where the challenges come in the brokerage community.
How, what is the mood of the community, the
Trade community?
the trade community?
You know
I
what?
mean, is everybody in a panic stage, or what is the sense? I mean, are we kind of, let's see what happens, let's wait? I mean, what is the sense? What is the overall sense in the organization?
You know, in the brokerage community, we're kind of, a lot of concern, obviously, because of the fact that we're going through automation and a lot of the systems are crashing. So we got concerns on that, but at the same time, we're concerned about some of the smaller and mid-sized slowing down. On top of that, you know, we're looking at some of the costs that are going to be passed on to the consumer going up. So the mood is kind of somber, you know. In addition to that, we're also trying to sit there hoping it plateaus soon instead of, you know, being so spontaneous and so fluid. And once we sit there and reach an area where we can kind of work with solid policy, then they can start doing better negotiations and start working on maybe moving plants more to the United States or kind of better business practices, because it's hard to move on a whim.
All of that comes at the expense or the pain of someone. Right. And I've sat here many times talking about whether it's the private sector or not. When you are trying to affect change, there's always pain associated with it. And you can't, it is impossible to make a change about in any form and expect that nobody is going to suffer in one shape or form. And so I guess, and depends on who you ask, but if you're the person that's going to suffer, well, obviously you don't want that change to take place. But I think that's the challenge, right? To find out, okay, so what is needed and how do we best accommodate and minimize the suffering at some point. But what is the mood in the business community?
Well, I think it's about the same as it is in the trade community. It's a little bit somber, and at this point, I would even say there's a little bit of apathy. It's kind of like, well, something changed again, so we'll just see what happens here. I mean, the market's responded accordingly. I think we're all kind of tense. We want to see what happens. I know I have a lot of friends in Mexico who are very scared, but they say the same thing, which is really interesting to me. It's they'll say that, yes, all this trade stuff is really concerning to us, but hey, it might fix Mexico, which that's not a response I expected to hear, but I've heard that constantly, day in and day out.
It's been, and it's funny you say that. I was actually in Mexico with some family things a couple of weeks ago, and I had the same conversation with some people that it was an odd response. It was like, you know, I mean, you would expect a lot of negativity coming out of it, and it was more of no, this may be helpful for us kind of thing.
But that mood's not shared with our Canadian friends. Our Canadian friends are they're hurt. You know, I think the Mexicans are kind of saying, well, this is what's happening, we'll get used to it. The Canadians are genuinely hurt. Paul Revere, who is a leader of the opposition up there, said, you just stabbed your best friend in the back. I mean, Canada's been a loyal ally of ours since the Second World War and since the First World War, and they're kind of saying, they're like, what did we do wrong? I don't know what that relation's going to look like, but my friends in Canada are fairly anti-American right now.
Wow.
And I suppose I understand
Yeah,
why.
they've always kind of been.
I want to talk a little bit
They're French.
about.
Yeah, that's just Quebec.
Yeah, well.
I want to talk a little bit about President Trump. Winning the election, he won the election hands out. Obviously, no recounts, nothing like that. Do you think, after what has happened these last 3 months that he's been in office, you think there's buyer's remorse in the business community or in the trade community? I mean, he had a lot of support. He was endorsed by, many organizations. What do you think they're thinking now? I mean, so many federal employees have lost their jobs. Department of Education just got slashed and so forth and so forth. You think people are thinking, oh my gosh, maybe we made a mistake?
We were at a couple of meetings in the meetings, and we were attending there in D.C. They said, I voted for Trump, but I didn't vote for this. So, I know one of the challenges that people are looking at is, it's just what's happening right now, fast and furious. But at the same time, some of it's good, but at the same time, some of it's, that they were looking to being challenged by the court systems.
It goes back to what I just said about, depends on if it affects you or not. Hey, I mean, if it's not affecting you, go keep doing it.
Well, but at the end of the day, it is affecting us, because I saw my little 401k kind of take a plunge, and my kid's 529 also just lost a couple of $1,000 because of Wall Street. So,
but let me push back a little bit on that, because part of that problem is, you can't be looking at, 90 days, 60 days or whatever. I mean, we don't know what the long-term effect, especially when you look at investments in stock markets and 401ks and all that. It's too short of a time to be making any decisions or assessments. You can't, you turn your computer off, wait 6 months, wait a year, then come up for air and see where we are. I mean, if you are looking at a progress every day, you're going to have bad days, you're going to have good days. But you got to give it some time.
Well, I mean, that's kind of historians often have a lot of prejudice when it comes to reading current events. I'm trained as a historian. I do nothing. I want nothing more in my life than to be a history professor. And when you look at current events,
Doesn't pay very much.
Well, it doesn't. But I like my $12 cigars. So that's one of my big problems. But here's the thing: when we look at history, and we say, well, of course the Allies in World War II were able to win. I mean, look what happened in 1945. But we never sit there and we say, well, what happens if we were in Britain in 1940?
That's right. How would we feel about it at that point?
How would we feel by that point? I mean, because we look back on these things and say, of course that's what happened. And I'm sure that's what's going to happen now. But you asked about buyer's remorse. I think the business community in some way kind of feels like the dog that caught the school bus. For years.
We've been talking about this, and now we did it. Hey, oops,
well, no,
what did we do?
Well, not even that. It's like, for years we've said, let's make government more like business. Let's make it more efficient. Well, golly, we're making it more efficient, and that's not the way government's supposed to work, or that's what some people are saying.
That's right.
Or now we're kind of feeling that pinch. It's like, wait, there's a process in government, and that's just the way it is. I'm anxious to see. I want to see what happens and what we say in 4 years.
That is my point.
But by that time, my kid will be out of college, and the 529 would have tanked. But I'm with you. I mean, I'm hoping. Obviously, I'm trying not to look at it. The little downscale, but hopefully it does bounce back. I know a lot of people are just kind of like, keeping their fingers crossed.
We need to bring you guys back more often
We
to
do.
talk about this stuff, because I assume we're going to be in it for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trade's
I
on the
hope we can.
forefront right now, and I tell you, there's a lot of discussion on that. I know that Customs is trying to provide information, but at the same time, they're being very careful. There's a lot of, this administration is really taking a deep leadership role. And with that being said, it's just certain challenges. So we look forward to coming back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you all so much. We appreciate having you with us. We're going to take a quick break, but stay with us. We'll be right back after. Welcome back, everybody. We just have a few minutes left just to talk about our one thing, Luis.
I am going to summon my inner Sergio Mora and talk about a book that I've been reading. I've actually just finished it. It's called Being Present, and it's by Janine W. Turner. And it is about how our lives have changed. Obviously, everybody talks about the advent of mobile services and things like that, but how that has translated. She's an actual professor at Georgetown University, and she teaches a class on the social importance of being in the moment, in person, in meetings, in school, and how complicated it has become to discuss things with the newer generation.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
That's right.
You were saying?
I know. No. It is a good book. It is a good book. You're channeling your inner Sergio. You know, my one thing is I just can't get out of my mind. There it is right there. The astronauts, they're back. We have Butch, we have Sunny. They are, you know, it was just a wonderful day to have them back on Earth, back on the ocean. And I just thought of all of the issues that are going on right now, it was just so nice to see that landing and see how everything just fell into place so nicely.
Thank you, Elon.
I'm sorry? Thank you, Elon. Okie doke. Well, on that
come
note.
on, give him a little credit.
Okay, he brought home the astronauts.
Yes.
Okay, he gets a brownie point for that.
Oh my God.
That's all the time we have, but we'll see you next Sunday for another issue of Beyond the Headlines. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy your week ahead.